Thank you, Daniel. I'm going to try to do the best job I can tonight, since I probably won't be coming back, at least for Daniel. Yeah, he had his head in the closet down there, and so I figured he was just getting some stuff ready for the meeting, and we came up here and sat around, visited, and waiting for him to show up, and he was waiting for me to show up. But anyway, I'm glad to be here. I wish Daniel had 2 or 3 other people lined up. I'd rather see them up here, but this is what we're supposed to do if we're asked to do something for AA. And if I'm going to grow spiritually, this is where I need to be. My name is Mike McCourt. I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety birthday is my sobriety date is October 15th of 1990, and for that I'm forever grateful to Alcoholics Anonymous. Home group is in Wilson. We meet on Monday and Thursday. Monday we have a big book study, and we do a tradition. We do a step meeting, and if there's a 5th Monday we do a history meeting, and every Thursday we have a speaker meeting. So if you're ever up our way, please come by. I know Daniel's been there before, Steve's been there, and probably some other folks in here have been. It's about a 2-hour drive down here, and so I've got a guy that I don't know about y'all, but if you have 2 hours to yourself, if I have 2 hours to myself, I'm going to be going over my talk so much that by the time I get here, I won't have anything to say. But I've got a friend that rides with me, a guy that I've worked with for the past 14 years or so, and believe me, there's never a dull moment. I never get a chance to get a word in edgewise, and I certainly don't get to get lost in my own thoughts. So maybe I'll have something to offer. But Lynn, thanks for coming down here with me. I appreciate it. The big book tells us that, we're not cured of alcoholism. What we have is a daily reprieve. And I think doing this kind of work is a spirit, enhances my spiritual life. It may be something that I'd rather be sitting out there listening to somebody else, but I do know that sharing my story and hopefully connecting with somebody that's new to Alcoholics Anonymous that's our mission, is to stay sober and help another alcoholic achieve sobriety. So this is what I do when I'm asked. I'm from Montana originally. I grew up out west, and have no excuse for being an alcoholic. I'm the only alcoholic in my siblings. I got 2 brothers and a sister. None of them. My little brother smokes a lot of weed, but doesn't drink. My older brother drinks some wine, but not like I did. So they don't qualify. But I grew up on a ranch in Montana until I was about 11 years old, and we had horses, we had cattle, we had goats, chickens, turkeys. It was an idyllic life. We really had a good time. I come from good parents. They raised us in church. Now, some people I hear say they grew up in church. We didn't really grow up in church, but we were at church a lot. We were Catholic, and so my parents they believed that Sunday was the day you went to church. Even we lived 17 miles out of town, and just to tell you a little bit about how tough it was to get to church sometimes. My dad broke the front axle on our Jeep pickup just trying to get us to church one Sunday morning through the snowbank. But they were determined to make sure that we were raised in church, and that went on until I was old enough to not go to church anymore, which is when I was in high school. But anyway, that was a great life. My brother and I, we had chores that we had to do. We had to bring the sheep in after we got out of school, and I've always been afraid of the dark. I'm not so much anymore, but in Montana in the winter, it gets dark about 4 o'clock. It's so far north that sun seems like it hardly comes up. And we'd have to go get those sheep in, and I'd be scared to death that they'd be so far away from the house that we wouldn't get back until after dark. And I figured I had all these visions of coyotes attacking us and mountain lions, and there were coyotes, but that was about the only thing we had out there, other than our domesticated animals. So we lived, I lived on the ranch for about 10 years. And then the ranch was, my mother owned a part of it, and with her brother and sister. And they wanted to sell the place. My parents decided that they didn't want to try to get that much debt. And so my dad was, he was an English teacher by profession, but he liked ranching better, but he went back to teaching. And so I don't know if anybody's been to Montana, but we've got really small towns up there. The town that we lived close to we lived on the ranch was about 1,500 people, but the town that we moved to after we left the ranch had 100 people in it. And so we had first, second, and third were all in one room, in one grade, fourth, fifth, and sixth, seventh, eighth, and then the high school was 9, 10, 11, and 12. And there probably wasn't 12 or 14 people in class, even though you combined all three of them. But once again, this was a beautiful place to live too. It was nestled in a valley, and this river ran through it called Belt Creek, and had a lot of brook trout in it, a few cutthroat. And so after school, I could just go get my fishing pole and walk over to the river and fish until it was time to go home and eat. We lived there for a couple of years, and it was really a great life too. We missed the ranch, of course, because we had a lot more space, but this was a beautiful place to live. We had a ski run actually that was about 5 miles up the mountain, and I learned to ski while we were there. The owners of the ski resort, well, it wasn't really a resort back in those days, but they would let us pack the slope, and we'd have to sidestep down the hill, the mountain, and then we'd get to ski for free for the rest of the day. So that was a pretty good deal, and I learned to ski that way. We lived there for 2 years. We moved to another small town, but this time it was about 350 people, and it was out in the prairie. It was called Rygate. The other town was Nyhart, but this was Rygate, Montana, and we lived there for 4 years. Pretty much the same thing. Real rural, lots of open spaces. It was one side was lined with rim rocks, about 50 or 60 feet high, and it had been an old river valley, and so there was a lot of rattlesnakes up in there, but I never did run across any rattlesnakes. But we would go up there, and that was our playground. Once again, it was just a lot of outdoor activity. My drinking didn't really start until I was in a sophomore in high school, and we moved to the first. It seemed like a city after where I'd been living. It was about 7,500 people. And we moved there when I was a sophomore. And it was a big change for me, having lived in these little small towns. And I was like, I was the small fish in the big pond all of a sudden, where I'd felt like the big fish in the small pond, in the big pond. So I was confronted with this conundrum that I wanted to be in with the popular folks, and so if there's a time in my life that I think that my people-pleasing personality started taking over, that was when it was. Now, when we first got there, I was on a hayride, and there was this girl on that hayride that looked. She was a knockout. And she looked just like Cher, real long hair. She played a guitar. She could sing, and I remember thinking, man, I want to go out with that girl. and I was just a sophomore, didn't know anybody there. And so, I set my sights on that, and the next year, we did date for a while, the next year in our junior year, and then we kind of went our separate ways. And I always went to a sawmill to work in the summertime, lived with my grandfather, and she went to Yellowstone Park to live. And so coming back to school our senior year, there was this rumor going around that her name was Carla, that Carla was pregnant. And so I come home from school one day, and I didn't really pay much attention to it. And I came home from school one day, and my mom says, "Hey, Mike, have you heard that Carla's pregnant?" And I guess my face just showed every emotion that I had. And I said, no, I haven't heard anything like that. But it wasn't about a week later that she asked me to go for a ride with her at lunchtime at school, and she told me told me what was happening, and she was pregnant, and she said it was mine. And you got to remember, this is a small town. My dad's an English teacher. They're active in the church. It was a bad scene. My mother's in tears. My dad, we never had real sex education, but when I told him, he said, "Mike, don't you know where babies come from?" And I really wanted to say, "Well, you never told me," but I didn't. That would not have been the right thing to do. So anyway, Carla went to a home for unwed mothers and had the baby, and she was back in school. But what was really awkward is my dad actually had her in class, and he was really a top-notch guy, and he never let that affect him as far as going and saying he didn't want her in his class or anything. She moved right back into his class, and she came back to school. And for me, once we decided what we were going to do, it just kind of disappeared from my radar. That was taken care of. I'm going to move on. I don't know how it was for Carla. I'm sure it was a lot rougher, but empathy was not my strong suit then. It's something that I've learned over the years. But anyway, we partied a lot in high school. We started drinking. When I would go live with my grandfather at that sawmill, he ran a mail route, so he was there at night. No, he slept during the day, and then he was gone at night. And so I would get off shift at the sawmill and go home, and I ran with these older guys that worked at the sawmill with me, and they always provided me with all the beer that I wanted. And so I drank pretty heavy during those summers. I wouldn't say I was an alcoholic. This was back when I was having a good time with alcohol. So graduated from high school, tried to go to college. That didn't work out very good. I left after a year. I was on scholastic probation and disciplinary probation, and moved to Denver. Just decided to move to Denver. I didn't know what else to do, and figured I was going to get drafted and probably end up going overseas. So I'm working in Denver at a service station with a best friend from high school, and my girlfriend from college comes through at Christmas and calls and asks if she could stop by and see me, and I told her, yeah. And this has been about 2 years since that deal with Carla, and she stops by, and she's pregnant, and so my roommate, my best friend in high school, says, "Let's go to Phoenix." and I said, "Okay, let's take off and we'll go to Phoenix." And then I started thinking about it, and I thought about my parents, and I thought about this had already happened once. How could I go through this, do this again? And so Patricia and I decided to get married, and we had Jason, and ended up moving to Texas, and I worked construction for her dad in Houston. Now, her dad wanted her to grow up and be a school teacher, so I was really low on the totem pole in his book. So what he did, he put me to work as a laborer on it was a refinery job, doing cracking towers and stuff. And so he put me to work at the very bottom as a laborer, a carpenter's helper. And I was determined that I was going to show that guy that I could work. And so I did. And this is probably when I started crossing the line into alcoholism, because he taught me how to drink whiskey. I hadn't drank a lot of brown liquor up until that time. And we would go out and we would drink, and then he was a big guy, strong guy. He would start crying, talking about how his daughter's not going to be a teacher anymore, and you know how we cry in our beer or whiskey. And anyway, we ended up bonding over all that stuff, and became pretty good friends. And he allowed us, my wife and I, to move up to another small town in Texas. And I went back to college after I'd saved enough money working for him at the refinery. And I kind of straightened out. Wasn't drinking, didn't have much money. In fact, we didn't have hardly any money. Thank goodness we were living for free as far as rent went. But I got back in college and kind of got focused once again. And I went through 2 years of college there in Stephenville, Texas, and then got accepted into the College of Pharmacy at the University of Texas in Austin. And so went down there, and believe it or not, I ended up graduating with high honors. And my wife and I, it was kind of a rough time. We were both too young to be married, and have a kid. I was 20 when he was born. She was 19. And I think I had 1 year left in pharmacy school, and my dad was 53 at this time. We just started really reconnecting and becoming close. And I got a call. It was the day before my birthday, February 2nd, in 1975. And they found him dead on the floor in the kitchen, getting ready to go to church. And that severed my relationship with God. I didn't have a close relationship with God anymore anyway, but that really did it. I was done with anything spiritual. And it kind of set me off on a bad path. I remember telling my wife that, this is back during the early 70s when everybody was liberal and everything was going on. I said, Patricia, I think we ought to consider having an open marriage. And she didn't like that. And she said, well, what are you doing? And I confessed a little transgression to her, and she said, no, I don't care. I still don't want to do this. And I told her, well, we were going to do it. I was going to do it anyway. And so that, we separated over that. And what happened was, I thought this was good for me until she said, well, okay, if you've got an open marriage, then it's open. And it was for her too. And that, male chauvinist, whatever. So we ended up separating. We got back together for a short time, but when I graduated, but that didn't work out either. And so what happened was, this is when my alcoholism really took off. I had custody of my son. He was in second grade, and I don't know why the judge allowed this, but I was going to have him for 2 years, and then we kind of assumed we'd be living in the same town. So then my wife was going to have him for 2 years. But what happened was, I would be living in Fort Worth, or she'd be living in Dallas, or Austin. And so he would be uprooted every 2 years, go to a new school, have to make new friends. Very selfish of both of us to put him through that. But the worst part probably was that I started drinking really heavy. I was probably drinking a case of beer maybe every night, every couple of nights at least. And I'm living in a dry county, so when Jason would get out of school, I'd load him up in our van and drive over to Proctor, which is about 13, 15 miles away, pick up my beer. Wouldn't get enough to last, 3 or 4 days, just buy a case at a time, do the same thing the next night, and then get home and put him to work on his schoolwork, That's painful to go back and review the kind of father I was to this kid. And it didn't do anything but get worse, because the next time he came to live with me, alcoholism took me to some interesting places. I lived in Las Vegas, in Paris. Of course, this was Paris, Texas. And it was Las Vegas, New Mexico. But anyway, they were the real towns. Anyway, we moved up to Paris, Texas, and I started drinking a lot of gin. Now, I remember Jason. When he'd go to bed, he would beg me. He said, "Please, Dad, don't pass out on the couch." I think he'd say, "Don't sleep on the couch tonight." And I said, "I'm not going to. I'm going to go to bed." And he'd find me there the next morning, when he was getting up to go to school get his cereal. And I'd be running around in a panic, trying to get him to school and trying to get me to work. And with a hangover and the shakes and all of that stuff that comes along with a gin habit. This was when I went to my first AA meeting, though. Unfortunately, I couldn't stay sober. Even I was drunk by 8 o'clock, and that's when the meetings were. It turned out that there was a house. It was a block away from me where I lived in Paris, and being an alcoholic, I didn't have anything else to do, so I'm sitting there looking out my window all the time, checking out the neighbors and seeing what life really is like, being envious of these people that seemed like living a normal life. But people would show up at this house about 7:30, quarter to 8, and then they'd all disappear. And then a little while later, they're coming out, getting in their cars and leaving. And I don't know how I found out that it was an AA meeting. I think it was a woman that I worked with said, you really need to get some help with this. And I know where there's a meeting and these people can help you. And so I went, but like I said, I don't remember. The only thing I do remember about that meeting was when they passed the basket. Well, the first thing I remember is that it went around, you introduce yourself, and I said, I'm Mike, and I'm an alcoholic, I think. And they laughed at me. And you know how we are. Man, I was offended. Laughing at me. Man, that took every bit of gumption I had to say that. But, and the next thing I did was when they passed the basket, I pulled out my $20 bill and popped it in there, thinking that, boy, these guys are in bad shape. They can use all the help I can give them. And headed for home. And that was the only AA I knew for a long time. I lost that job and ended up moving out to Las Vegas, New Mexico. And I was working at a mental hospital out there, which was probably appropriate. But I was a pharmacist. That's my profession. And once again, what happened to me so much was that I would go into work smelling like booze. And they'd say, "Mike, you can't come to work smelling like you've been drinking. You can't come in here smelling like alcohol." And I did there. I did it every job. And what they did, they sent me to a psychiatrist there that was on site. And I went and talked to her several times. And of course, we're not honest. She did give me a script for Librium, so I kept going back. And of course, Librium and alcohol go pretty good together. It kind of cuts down on how much you have to drink. But I certainly didn't stop. And this was the same time that I had gone to a doctor. I'd been throwing up blood, and he told me my liver enzymes were through the roof. And, all this stuff that I'm in the medical profession. I should know that this is bad news. But alcohol, that's how powerful alcohol is for us alcoholics. It was for me. The liver thing didn't bother me. Once the psychiatrist stopped seeing me, or I stopped seeing her, I don't even remember how that went down. I didn't need the Librium. I had what I needed, and that came from the liquor store. I had to leave Las Vegas abruptly. I didn't get fired from that job, but I was living in this little compound of 4 little apartments, little adobe mud huts, I guess you'd call them. But it was really a quaint little place, and it was neat. And living in one of them was a school teacher, real conservative guy, younger than me at the time. He was probably in his early 20s. And anyway, one night, man, I heard all this glass breaking and hollering, and I didn't know what was going on. I was in one of my stupors. But the next morning, he came over and he said, somebody came by my place last night, threw rocks through all my windows, and just tore everything up. Said they were going to get me. And I said, "Wow, man!" I said, "What have you been doing?" He said, "Nothing. I'm just a school teacher." Well, it was actually aimed at me, and it was the husband of this woman I was seeing, and his friends. And so Las Vegas was in my rearview mirror just a short time later. I didn't even wash the dishes. Everything stayed. Except my clothes, I took them with me. But I left a sink full of dirty. I did that several times. When I moved, I just left. But anyway, I got out of Las Vegas and I was back in Texas. And I'm still working in pharmacy. And I ended up getting married again, not been the second time. And this is, I know, it's the third time, but she was pregnant too. And I thought really, what I was thinking is that I'm going to get a family. And that started to straighten me out, 10 years ago. Maybe it'll work this time. Maybe I'll get straight and start living right. And so I quit drinking. I didn't quit doing everything, but I did quit drinking. And I also thought, well, we got this new kid. I got a new wife. I need a change of scenery. These people that I'm hanging with they're going to bring me down. And so we moved to West Virginia from Texas. And I ended up there. Still didn't drink for a month. We got there on Halloween. That would have been the end of, October? So 2 months. But New Year's Eve, I told my wife, here we go. I've been sober a long time. I've got this thing under control. Let's get some wine and celebrate New Year's Eve. I think she had some misgivings, but we did. We did that. And it set me off on my last drunk. It lasted about 6 months. And what happened was, once again, I'm confronted with the fact that I smell like alcohol. And so they offered to send me to treatment. And I said, I don't need treatment. I'll just quit drinking. That's what I told them. And what I did, I didn't quit drinking. I did taper off for a while, but what I ended up doing was I started ordering some drugs to keep myself off alcohol. Well, these were controlled drugs. It wasn't like antabuse or anything like that. It was stuff to, I got to feel different. I can't just go around feeling normal, whatever that was for me back then. So I ordered a bunch of, every week I'd order me a batch. And what happened, what I look at that time is, that was my first surrender. What I decided was, I'm going to drink and do all of this stuff until I can't anymore, or until something happens, till something stops me. And I really was resigned to, I was never a suicidal type person. I don't think I had the courage. But if I would have died during that time, I don't think it would have bothered me. I think I was kind of resigned to the fact that this is not going to end good. And it didn't, but it didn't end the way, God's always got a plan for us. Thank God he did. I came back from vacation in June of that year, 6 months after I'd started drinking. And the highway patrol pulled me over right before I was turning into the hospital that I worked at, so that everybody coming to work could see. And they came up, they asked for my registration, my driver's license, and all that stuff. And I thought, well, this is good. I'm going to be good on this one. And then he comes up with a handful of warrants for my arrest. And each one of those times that I ordered those drugs, it was a felony. And so they drove my car to the police station and put me in the back seat, and off I went to jail. Now, here I'd been, this was in '89, I'd been working as a pharmacist for 15, 16 years, and I didn't have the money to hire a lawyer or make my bail. So I was in jail for about 10 days, and my mother at this time, she was widowed. She was working at a penny store in the fabric department. She was a real good seamstress. And, not making any money to speak of, but keeping her head above water. And I called my mom from jail and asked her to send me, I forget how much it was, in the thousands, to bail me out of jail and to hire me a lawyer. And she gave me an earful, but she did it. She did it. And I think I was starting to get some clarity, because about halfway through that stint in jail, it was about 10 days, maybe 12, my wife came down there with my son, who just turned 1 year old, and there he is, I'm waving at my family through the bars. This is the family that I was gonna straighten up and fly right for. And I was up in the felon section of this jail. It was up on the 3rd floor, and there's some rough dudes up there. I always carried this notion, this ego thing, that I was pretty tough. I found that wasn't the case when I was in jail. A lot of these guys were waiting to be placed in prison. They're either getting out and spending the rest of their time in county, or they were in county waiting for their bed in Huttonsville. So I was ready to get out of there. Thank God I did, and I went to a short stint of treatment. My insurance only covered 7 days, so that's what I got. I can't say that it made a big change in me, that treatment did. But there was a guy there. His name was Bill Painter, and he was an alcoholic, a recovered alcoholic, and he had one leg. He had a peg leg, and I remember he said to me that, and I don't know why I would just remember this, but he said, how old are you, Mike? And I said, 39. And he said, this may be your last chance. If you don't get sober this time, he may not get sober. And he just kind of left it open-ended like that. And why that stuck with me, I really don't know, but it really did. So I got out of that treatment center. I was going to outpatient therapy with a substance abuse counselor who was he wasn't an alcoholic, but he was a cheerleader for Alcoholics Anonymous. Man, he pushed it down my throat, I felt. And so I started going to meetings, and these meetings in West Virginia were not well attended. It was a pretty small town, but I would say 90% of the people in the meeting were coal miners that worked underground. And this was when I was still rejecting anything spiritual. And I don't think I really liked it. Of course, I didn't understand these steps or anything like that, but the God word just raised bristles on my back of my neck. And I don't know why, but I was just really antagonistic toward religion. And I didn't know spirituality and religion might be two different things. But these coal miners, I talked about what I that they believed in God and I didn't, and they said, well, just make the AA meeting your higher power for now. We're sober and you're not. At least we got that much power over you. And so I tried doing that. And what impressed me though was these guys. They worked some of those coal seams. Weren't probably 2.5, 3 feet high, and they're working down there in those seams, following that miner it's digging the coal out of that seam, and then it sends it back on a belt and goes all the way up to the top. But they're down there running that miner all, for an entire shift on their belly in that cold, dark, dirty coal mine. And these guys, I really respected them. And when they talked in the meeting one time about, they said a prayer for their safety before they went in the mine, and they thanked God that they came out safe when they came out of the mine. And it, like Bill says in the big book, at some point that those blinders that I had on kind of fell away. And when those guys talked like that, I really decided that I was going to give that a try. I was going to give this spiritual thing a try. Because they also told me that if I didn't get in touch with a higher power of my understanding, that I wasn't going to stay sober. And by this time, I really had decided, it was probably 1.5 years into this stint of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I hadn't drank. And I forget where I was going with that. I was still thinking that spirituality and religion were one and the same. So I started going to church, little Baptist church just down the road from where we lived, and even accidentally got baptized. What happened was, how I wasn't used to the Baptist church. I was Catholic, you're up and down, but there's no call to the altar or anything. They always sing a song at the end, but this time he asked everybody to what he said was, I forget what he said, but anyway, it was an altar call rather than the last song, and I popped up thinking that we were going to sing the last song before we left, and man, I was all of a sudden somebody on each arm, dragging me down there and said, "We'll baptize you next week. That's great, Mike." And so I say I was accidentally baptized because I had no intention of that happening, but I went through with it. I thought it's not going to hurt me. But that first year or 1.5 years in Alcoholics Anonymous, the obsession and the want to drink just would not leave me. It was terrible. I daydreamed about it. What happened with the law thing is that about 2 years after that incident, maybe it was 1.5 years, they let me plead guilty to one felony, and then I had house arrest for a year. And I had one of those ankle bracelets that I had one before Martha Stewart, is what I like to say. She had one for a while. But I had an ankle bracelet, and my wife was working, and I had the opportunity to be a sober stay-at-home father. And I'd like to say that I really took advantage of that, and I did as much as I possibly could. But I was so obsessed during that time also with how those 13 felonies were going to be resolved. And I also felt like I was supposed to be the breadwinner. And they had jerked my pharmacy license in Texas and West Virginia, so I wasn't licensed anywhere. And there's this pharmacist recovery network that I'd talked to that thought maybe they could help me. And they said, if you got a felony, you're never going to work again, not in pharmacy. So I started thinking about it, and I started recording all the meetings that I went to. And 2 years into it, I took my sponsor. He was a Vietnam vet, a recovered alcoholic, and He'd lost his job with the police department from drinking, but he was a good guy. And I took my notebook with my meetings and took him with me, and we went up and met with the Board of Pharmacy in West Virginia. And it was really an experience, because Alcoholics Anonymous taught me how to speak at non-AA meetings. And I was able to tell them what I wanted to do as a result of being in Alcoholics Anonymous. And at the end of my spiel to them, there was this one woman that I thought was an old lady then. She's probably younger than I am now. But anyway, she's sitting at the end of the table, and she says, "Well, you know, you're going to have to go to those meetings for the rest of your life." And I'm just nodding my head, as fast as I can. Yep, that's exactly what I'm going to do. And they gave me my license back, probated license, but it took me forever to get a job. I thought getting a license back would be the solution, but nobody would hire me. I'd have these interviews, and they'd say, "We'll give you a call. I think everything looks good." I'd never hear from them again. I don't know how many times that happened. And what happened was, this guy that had his own drugstore in that town, who I had actually siphoned some controlled drugs off when I forgot to order mine, called him up and said, "We got somebody in the hospital that needs this, and we don't have any in stock." And I did all my amends to him. We went out to eat, and I told him just exactly what I did, and I don't think it was a surprise to him. But he said, "I wonder what happened to you." But what he did, he hired me part-time for 30 hours a week just to see how things would go. And I ended up working for him for 8 years. Man, the guy he was a rock to me, because he allowed me to get back into this profession, become a breadwinner again, and to start making amends to this profession that I had really abused. And so what we ended up doing, my wife and I and my new son, moved out to North Carolina. And every time I moved, I had to go before a new board and explain why I've got a felony on my record. So I came down here and explained to the Board of Pharmacy pretty much the same way I had done in West Virginia. I didn't have my sponsor with me, but I talked to them, and they gave me my license down here, and I had a job in Rocky Mount. And then I thought I'd really try to see what AA can do for me. And I wanted to get my advanced degree in pharmacy, and so I applied to UNC Chapel Hill, and just by the outside chance, they might let a convicted felon in. And once again, I had to go and talk to I think it was the dean and assistant dean. But anyway, I went in and I met with them, and I took AA with me, just like I had learned to do, and they let me into their program, and I got my advanced degree, and I'm retired now, but I finished it out, and I became a teacher, an instructor. I took students and had them for 2 to 3 months at a time, and before they graduated, they were my interns, and I tried my best to make up what I had done, the disrespect that I had done to my profession, and I feel like I really did. I came away from that experience. I really enjoyed teaching, for one thing. I really liked that. But I came away from that experience feeling pretty whole again, and for the first time. And in 1997, I got to go back to this. I had a picture of Carla and my baby that was born when we were in high school, one of those little snapshots that they take when a baby's first born. And I had it in my wallet, and it just, over time, just disintegrated. But in 97, my mom called me. I've been sober, 7 years. And she said that a young woman had called her and wanted to get in touch with me. And she said, it's your daughter. And I just about dropped. After I got sober, I started thinking about, how did her life turn out? How did things go for her? And so I got on the phone immediately and called her, and she had just had my first grandson. And so I flew out to Montana and met her, and we spent about 3 or 4 days together getting to know each other. And now I go out once a year and drive up to Plentywood, which is 5.5 hours from the nearest airport, and spend time with her husband, and my 3 grandkids. And we're in touch all the time. What a reward. What if that would have happened when I was drinking? My mom wouldn't have even called me. It just wouldn't have happened. And I would never have known that I've got these great grandkids. I would never have known my daughter. So the rewards that have come from Alcoholics Anonymous have just piled on me. I think about why me? How come this is? First of all, I don't know how many people who come through the doors stay, but I don't think it's much more than 1 in 100, maybe 2 in 100. I don't know what your experience is, but it seems like it to me that we just don't reach that many alcoholics, that they just don't get the desire to stop. And why we did, and that person who walks back out again didn't, I don't understand. Because I didn't even come into AA to get sober. I came in here to get out of trouble. My impression of AA was that, I might run into a judge, I might run into a lawyer, who knows, but this may be my ticket to get out of those felonies. God's got a plan that just totally befuddles your mind, because it just totally, if I would have got, you've heard this before, I'm sure, if I'd have got what I wanted when I walked through the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous, I'd have sold it so far short. Because what I've got is this life now. I've got a wife that, I'm connected with, the woman that I was married to when I moved down here. We just didn't see eye to eye. This is my last marriage, and there's no more kids. But I'm married to a really wonderful woman. I've got a great sponsor. The home group that I've got has grown. Like I said, Daniel's been up there, Steve's been up there, and we just celebrated our 20th anniversary in September. And who came up to speak? From Oklahoma. Yeah. Anyway, doesn't matter. He gave a great talk, and we had a good turnout. And I guess I can just sum it up by saying that Alcoholics Anonymous is wherever I look in my life, I see Alcoholics Anonymous reflected. Because when I came in here, I was hopeless. But I hadn't reached that point of desperation, even though I should have. I'd left out a lot of things that I was doing that would demonstrate how crazy I was, carrying around a loaded gun, just stuff that could have got me into a lot more trouble than I ended up in, because of the paranoia that we get. But anyway, Alcoholics Anonymous has taken care of all of those things. My felony took care of me owning a gun. So you don't have to worry about that. They won't let me have one. But that's okay. I don't think I need it. I've got a host of friends that make sure that I'll stay in line. And I appreciate y'all listening to me, and I hope that you got something out of my talk. Thanks.